it's an honor to introduce this incredible panel that we have for this, and that it's about genetics, because that's where it all starts, is with genetics. And it couldn't be more important. I live on the ranch up here in Mendocino County in the heart of the Emerald Triangle, where we grow some of the best cannabis in the universe, I would say. And so I'm constantly surrounded by it, not just in this picture here, but it's my life. And I'm very proud to announce these people that are going to be on this panel, because they're all just geniuses in their field and have certainly been inspirations to all of us. And that would start with Will Grinnell, who's going to be moderating this panel a lot. And Will is actually in Hawaii on the island of Maui, growing some of that pakalolo over there and breeding. Will is an amazing breeder, and he's got a breeding company there that he's going to tell you all about. It's you know, pretty amazing, and he's working on deep gene genetics, and he's also very involved with Earthdance. So Will's a real part of our family, and great to be represented in the cannabis world from Hawaii today. And then I can see Ed Rosenthal's here. Hello, Ed. Haven't seen you in a while. And Ed is, a longtime advocate for our causes here. He wrote one of the very first books back in the 70s about growing cannabis. And most recently, his book has been about harvest, marijuana harvest, that he wrote with David Downs. And that's a fountain of knowledge. And Ed is a fountain himself. And so we'll look forward to hearing from Ed. And now I can see also dear Josh and Kelly from Dragonfly Earth Medicine. Oh, this is just a treasure trove of people here. And Josh and Kelly are checking in from Oregon, I'm imagining, unless they're in Canada. They move around, and they okay, and they represent. They are co-founders of Dragonfly Earth Medicine, which is just really it's what inspires us all about regenerative agriculture. That they're really a moving force in this movement, specifically around regenerative agriculture and cannabis. And just, we love them to death. So glad to see them here. They always have amazing things to share. And then over here, the last but not least, we've got Nat and Ben. All right, Nat, great to see you. All right, we're happy to say that here at our Swami Select Gardens this summer, we're growing, let's see, we've got 4 kinds of Humboldt Seed Company seeds that we're growing. So these guys all represent Humboldt Seed Organics, and they just do amazing breeding as well right here in the heart of the Emerald Triangle up in Humboldt County. And the 4 that we have are looking awesome already, I have to tell you. I can't wait to see what that freak show is going to do. It's the most unusual looking plant I've ever seen. And I'm very curious to know about that, and curious to know what you guys are going to all say. So let's get it started. And Will, I'm going to turn this over to you to start asking some questions from a breeder's point of view.
Right. Thank you, Nikki. Aloha. Aloha, everyone.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, what an honor to be a part of this panel, just in any way, form. And Ed, Ben, Josh, and Kelly, we had a magical time in Honolulu not too long ago, right as this pandemic was starting to come around. We were all out mid-February for the Hawaii Cannabis Convention all together. And I look at those memories, I cherish those memories, I look back at them all the time, because whoever knew, hindsight's 2020. We thought maybe we'd have normal days ahead, be going to restaurants together. And, now life has changed globally. And just looking back in those times, because right on that weekend, it was really starting to happen, mid-February, and we were all aware. We had, I remember we all showed up to the booth, and each of us had like 3 or 4 hand sanitizers. So we had this arsenal of hand sanitizers and stuff. So yeah, today we're going to talk about genetics and the lineage of cannabis, past, present, and future. And Ed, I know the other day we started a great conversation going, way back a couple thousand years to the Indochina origins of cannabis. And, really there's the very few strains that we really started with. And at the end of the day today, truly, that's really, those cultivars are really what we're all working with. And we're just breeding different phenotypes of the indica or sativa or ruderalis, which now the autoflower has become very popular. And, I'd like to just open the floor with that. If we maybe even continue where we were, Ed. And I don't see Ben or Nat on my panel, but you guys are there, right?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Hey, there you are. Nat, how are you?
Good. All right.
Right on.
I just invite Don Carlos happened to be here at the farm, and so I thought he might want to say hi to everybody because it's Earthdance, and
Yes, I to each and every one of you. Wisdom is the best of knowledge, and we are here, to show that and give that to the people. Which meaning that herb is the healing of the nation. And it's the medicinal use from all human. So, we just wanna, give a shout out to you all for really keeping up the vibes and, spreading the message and letting the people know the truth about this plant,
Right on. Don, it's great to see you. I haven't seen you in years. You're looking good. Oh, you're looking real good.
Thank you, my brother.
Cannabis is keeping us all fit.
I know.
Thank you, my brother. Thanks.
He puts me to shame. And then my good friend Monique as well is in the house. Monique represents a ton of NorCal brands and farmers, local farmers. But I just wanted these guys to say hi, and I'm ready to keep it.
Aloha.
Bless it.
Yeah. Don, you've been missed out here. We got to get you back here to Maui soon.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm longing to be there again.
Right on.
Thank you. Thank you, my brother.
Okay. So, Ben, I didn't see Ben, but Nat, do you want to have any comments on, the past lineages?
Yeah, I didn't mean to tangent, but I fully hear what you and Ed are talking about. I mean, it brings me back to how I think the name ganja came from the Ganges River. Does everybody agree with that? Because
No, I don't agree with that. No, I believe it's just the name. It's a Sanskrit word for cannabis is what it is.
Ganja?
But I don't think it comes from the Ganges River. But they often water it with water from the Ganges River.
Cool.
Well, yeah, you guys should start it off, really, I think.
Okay. Well, I'm fascinated with all aspects of the genetics. I started farming cannabis with intention in 1973 and never looked back. And, what I do look back at is those genetics from the 70s, the early 70s and all through the 80s, because there really wasn't the whole hybrid thing going on. It was more of what we called sock drawer seeds, just, seeds from our uncle's sock drawer or, some old lineage, or maybe we knew a traveler. My sister was an older hippie. And so a lot of her friends were doing, traveling in Nepal at that time, and they would bring back some genetics. And that was the first really, really good weed that we could grow in New England. That's where I grew up. I was back in New Hampshire and Massachusetts at the time. And it was really hard to find an acclimated strain because we were getting a lot of Thais and Colombians and stuff like that coming in. And so we tried growing them in the 45th parallel, and a lot of times it wouldn't complete flowering. And then all of a sudden these seeds were coming through from northern India, Ladakh. I remember some of the first seeds I grew. A traveler friend of my sister's had passed on the seeds to her. She wasn't really a farmer at the time, so I got them. I was a 12-year-old, and ended up growing those. And that was the first real acclimated strain, because obviously those were from near the 45th parallel, and they just boom popped that year. And that's when I learned about breeding, because we said, oh gosh, this one plant, how we got to recreate it. What do we do? Well, pretty simple. We keep a few of the males around, and there we had it. We had our next generation for the next season, because back then, of course, we were only growing outdoor and guerrilla style too, of course, way hidden, far away. And that was that's my story that I want to jump into. I wanted to also welcome Josh and Kelly. Are you guys there? Because we were all in Hawaii together. We had some spectacular conversations about genetics and older lineages too. We all were looking, into the past and really having some fond memories of those days.
You
Now,
hear us, Josh and Kelly?
okay, well, when they come in,
There might be some sort of.
They need to unmute.
now, Nat, I know
Ed needs to unmute.
you're Nat. I know you're old school, and for a while you didn't go feminized, and you were sticking with regular seeds, and now you've stepped into that a little bit, and you guys have done a tremendous job. And I'm curious about autoflower. I've never worked with an autoflower, and my understanding is it's basically just a ruderalis. Is that correct?
Well, I've kind of come to think that, essentially the sort of the Latin and the way that we try to classify species and all of the subspecies and things like that tends to be a little flawed just in general, and that things don't always fit into a box as much as we'd like them in the Latin definition of botany. But really what we've seen is that so I worked a lot with salmon, and just an analogy that I saw was there were salmon that traveled upstream in the spring and salmon that traveled upstream in the fall. And I kind of tend to think of autoflowers and when they happen to breed together, which was normally, it was in an unnatural situation, like a human anthropogenic, like a hatchery. And we would see these heterozygotes, or fish that would swim up in the middle of summer, and they wouldn't be really successful. But, really the trait that swam up early, it was eventually through enough breeding, they could move them back into a watershed where they were gone. And so I kind of think that the autoflower is something that was, evolved in Siberia apparently. But I think that trait, that you can essentially cut that trait and kind of paste it. And I'm not talking about genetic modification or gene editing or anything, but just through, some very selective breeding, that it seems like we can cut and paste it into a lot of our like really modern, or just generally popular strains that we've got for whatever reason. And so I kind of think, in my opinion, it's come to basically, if it can help us make cannabis with less electricity, less consumption of all of our resources,
Mm-hmm.
and what we want is the flower, and that it gets us to that in the quickest way, and we retain all of the good characteristics that we're after, which I now feel like it is really possible to do that. I think let's go for it. I mean, it's just selective breeding. It's what we've been doing forever. And, we're not big fans of genetic modification or gene editing, but this is just picking your favorite plant. And if it happens to flower really early, or, exactly 3 months, it's later after you germinate, then that's great, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, less of a footprint. I like that concept.
Yeah.
Cool.
We
Ed,
just back from, I'm on the salmon topic because we were just swimming down at our local river, and we got on the subject, and I think the important thing is, one thing that we learned with salmon biology was that there were certain types of fish that no matter what, you couldn't replace them. And if they got lost or went extinct, then it's a travesty because you can't get it back. And I tend to think that because cannabis is so important to humanity, and certainly the community on this, festival or whatever. Let's do what we can to make sure we keep our old school populations and the Jamaican lamb's bread, things like that. And I see Ed's with us. Ed, I know you know a lot about landrace and all the, the evolution of cannabis. So.
Well, don't look for land races in the places where they originated, because any place where there was intercourse with Europeans or Americans, that those land races have been hybridized with more modern varieties. And that includes virtually all of Jamaica, whether the farmer intended that or not, because pollen travels. And there's been a lot of changes in the cultivars that were there like 40 years ago and the ones that are there now, because they've all been mixed. And the only place where you'll find like a pure Jamaican is in a collector's seed bank.
Yeah.
And the same thing for Moroccan and I don't know, probably Afghani, though I'm not sure about that. But other places too, where anywhere where it was where people Westerners traveled, there was gene exchange.
Thank you, sir. That's so true.
I mean, and you can't blame the farmers. For instance, when I went to Jamaica many years ago, my host took me to this tea shop, and I had some joints that rolled from material from Europe, that was grown in Europe and in the Netherlands. And I lit up a joint, and I was mobbed by all the farmers there who wanted to hit off the joint, but also wanted seeds. And if you can improve your stock, you don't think about so much about preserving the land race, because usually the land races were not as potent as the. I couldn't get high 40 years ago. I couldn't get high off the hash there. People would say it's good Moroccan, and I would think that that was a contradiction in terms. So, but when I was there 2 years ago, that had changed. And there's one particular province there, Katama, where it's legal, and up to the border of the province, the only agricultural product that they grow is cannabis. And then you step over the province line, and it's normal farming, alfalfa and other crops, figs, olives, different things, but no cannabis. But this one province, Katama, and it's populated by Berbers, and the Moroccan flag doesn't fly in that province, but there's a Berber flag that flies there. And so they don't mess with the province. Yes?
I was just going to say, I have to agree with you, Ed, on that. I always thought Afghani was the way to go back then.
Yeah.
The Moroccan just didn't quite pack that punch you were looking for. But I'm so happy to see that Josh and Kelly have made it back. Can you unmute yourself so you can join us in here?
Yes, we are here. Sorry about that. All of a sudden had a
Great.
computer glitch right at the wrong moment. So
Mercury's retrograde. We understand.
there you go. We made it back.
Big aloha. It's great to see you both.
Yes,
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, we feel so honored to be here, and a lot of what you all are. We missed some of what you were talking about, but I guess Josh, you actually had something to say.
No, I just we give thanks to cannabis, and it's been a major driving force in our life through our whole consciousness and our whole desire to connect with nature and our whole desire to be radical and be self-reliant and buck the system and choose herbalism. Cannabis was a catalyst, and in that way it was our gateway towards self-reliance. And I love this cannabis community and in a global fashion too, because we've been around as well. But we're not as, we're on the second wave, so we give thanks to our elders.
And that's what I wanted to say is that, now this mainstream and people are really following a lot of the radical ideologies, and we could go back and talk about the land races, and all of those land races were brought in and rebred by sort of the second generation have today comes from a really radical stance, not just how the seeds even got here. To smuggle seeds from Afghanistan was a really big deal. It took a really activist stance to do that, and I really don't want to let this panel go without a deep gratitude to all of those people who brought in those original seeds, that we really stand on these giants for us to be able to continue the breeding that we have today. And my start was 1989. I was up in Alaska, and I was growing 2+ acres with Johnny Appleseed of the original Matanuska Thunderfuck up in Denali. So, as a youthful person, I was working with all elders, on maybe a 5-hour hike way out into the wilderness, and to hear their stories of how the seeds were bred and to hear you all today is just a true honor to the master plant that we're all honoring today.
So
Right
can
on.
I ask you what do you guys do with genetics at this point, with Dragonfly or on your own? Are you actually doing breeding?
Oh yeah.
We've always done breeding since we got up here. And we originally were breeding outdoor British Columbian genetics that were early finishing and got done in the end of August to beginning of September because of weather. And there was a lot of variety in those at the time. If you grew a few hundred plants, you could get some ruderalis or some more haze style or some more time warpy, British Columbian kind of coastal plants that came in and stuff. But we were growing genetics from the conscientious objectors from the late 60s and 70s who came up here, from California, anywhere in America, that were trying to go beyond McCarthyism and the military industrial complex of cannabis followed them. And we were growing those genetics. Today, what we do is we work on all genetics, including hemp varieties, because we really like to make medicine from hemp and fuse that with other herbs, medicinal mushrooms, and Chinese herbs. And we also breed outdoor varieties that finish in August and September still. But we're using more like lion claw and more auto flowering genetics with more OG flavors in those to enhance the zone. And then also hash varieties, really killer dumping hash varieties.
And the other thing that we're doing up here in BC is we have trees that we're working on old genetics. So a lot of the industry is going to clean genetics by maybe putting them through tissue culture or giving them more of an allopathic entrance, like, hey, we're going to be able to clean these plants. But what we're doing is we're trying to bring back a lot of the old land races by cleaning them in deep, rich microbiology soil, so that we're ridding the plant of tremendous amounts of pathogens, and we're doing it in a more holistic way rather than an allopathic way that uses tissue culture that we may not be able to rely on. So we're really rejuvenating strains through deep soil microbiology techniques.
Fascinating.
Very
Fascinating. And Will, I have a question for you. Would you say that then, like, for example, what the seeds that you use in Hawaii wouldn't work for us in Humboldt or Mendocino, or for Josh and Kelly up in Canada, or even for Ed where he is in the East Bay? I mean, what would you say?
They work spectacular. We're not equatorial here. We're 22 degrees north, and I have growers in Maine, a lot of growers there in Laytonville on the Woodman side, up in Alder Point, and I'm trying to think the other friend of mine over there. But first season out, I mean, just tremendous results. Matter of fact, a lot of them a few years ago, because about 4 or 5 years ago, I traveled quite a bit. I think I remember stopping by your place actually when we were doing Reggae in the River. But I spent a lot of time in that community, and I was giving away a lot of seeds. And then I had some clients that purchased some seeds from the Triangle, and they made comment, you know, they only planted like 50 or so, and they said, man, I wish we planted more. These are like just robust, and they're going crazy. Because what happens with the seeds that we breed out here is we have a very rich, pathogen-rich air out here, of course, you know, being semi-tropical. And so there's a lot of stuff coming at these plants, and they're building resistance. They're just putting out all that DNA to resist against all that. So, you know, mildew and many different pathogen resistance are created pretty quickly within an F2 sometimes, and certainly within an F3 or F4. So we have amazing results all over the place. The highest I've ever had my genetics grown, I think, is around 55 degrees north. I'm not sure how far north Nelson is, because I have some friends up there have been growing the strains. And matter of fact, I think Josh and Kelly, my CBD Wonka #3, which is a 1-to-1 ratio, was a 10% CBD, and it is a 10% CBD, 10% THC strain. And that one, I think you guys said, did tremendously up there. How far north are you guys?
We're just below 50 to 51 at 2,500 feet elevation in a mountainous valley. So, and your genetics did really well here. And what we find is we get that special, unique flavor that Hawaii offers in the genetics, you know, coming out here.
And, you know, I gotta just sort of tail in on this, is that when we do get genetics from other people where it's been grown in a really intentional way, living soil, we sort of know where they're coming from, because we get a lot of seeds from everybody every year, and we can only put out a certain percentage to try to find some new phenos that are not part of our own breeding structure and our own genetics. And we really find that people who are giving us intentional seeds that are coming from deep soil and regenerative practices, they do very well right off the bat. And then the indoor genetics that we get, you know, sometimes they're a wash. We direct sow right into our soil. We feel like if they're not going to come up, then they're not necessarily worthy of us to continue breeding in you know, the standards that we do. So yeah, Will, your genetics came up wonderfully, and we've just have been finding that across the board.
They made our fingers sticky.
Yeah, sticky fingers. That's how it all started. Yeah. Cool. So we have, unfortunately, a short panel. We could carry this on for all day, I think, with this group especially. This is awesome. It's like a family reunion. I just wanted to make sure that Ben had a chance. I wanted to say hi, and actually get back to Ed too, and hear his thoughts.
Well, you know, if you look at all the tomatoes that made it to Europe, it represented 3% of the genetics of the tomatoes in the Americas. And that all those varieties came from a very small genetic pool. And I believe that we're missing the main genetic pools, because we will find that diversity of genetics where cannabis originated. And that is the country that I think that you mentioned, the India, Ladakh would be right at the just a short distance from the beginning of the Himalayan foothills. And that whole area, I don't know exactly where in that area it originated, but it traveled the whole length of that area. And I think that it was a question of being both domesticated and then growing feral and being domesticated again. And there were a lot of different populations that crossed, you know, the populations crossed what are now called borders. And they went, you know, as far west as, for instance, Pakistan and Afghanistan, and as far east as Mongolia. And that whole area should, between the domesticated populations and the feral populations there, there's a tremendous amount of diversity that hasn't found its way into Western marijuana yet.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Michael, how are we doing with time?
We're good. We're perfect. This has been fantastic.
We're wrapping up now. Is
Very
that
informative. Yeah, we're ready to go on to our next panel. So,
quick
Nikki.
panel, I just wanted to thank everyone. It's awesome. Let's do this again. I'm thinking about starting a thing called Deep Green called Marijuana Mondays. Probably starting at the first Monday of September. So let's get this group back together for that. Oh, nice. Donnie, great to see you. Great to see everybody. And Michael, I guess you can take it from here.